Nice. Right. That's welcome. We're gonna get started. There will be people trickling in, and that's okay, but we have a really packed agenda and we want to make sure we get to everything on the agenda. So thank you everyone for joining us on Zoom. Did we unmute? Perfect. Can I get a thumbs up that you can hear us okay? Great, thank you, Christy. Thank you, Supervisor. There are breakfasts for you. Yeah.
I think she had the in-person meeting just.
I did. Just smart, yes. So this will be sort of informal. It's not like our regular quarterly meetings, but I did want to remind us that we're a program of the Tahoe Truckee Community Foundation. In addition to our grant making, we have 3 initiatives. We have the Mountain Housing Council, Forest Futures, and the Community Collaborative. This is our board of directors. I don't believe we have anyone from our board joining us today. This is our lovely staff. So today our support is with Anne Graham, who is our Forest Futures coordinator. And then of course we have our CEO, Stacey Caldwell here. So, and I am Christina Kine. I'm program director for the Community Foundation. And then I also want to take a moment just to acknowledge our elected officials in the room. So we have Lindsay Romack from the town of Truckee. We have Supervisor Hardy Bullock from Nevada County, and then joining us on Zoom, thank you so much. We have Placer County supervisors. And I think that is it for our elected officials in the room. Hi, Heidi. Good to see you. And I don't believe we have any press. I am recording this. We were gonna have Tahoe Truckee Media here to record, but we decided to keep it simple, and so the recording will be just in my Zoom, which we will make available after this meeting on Mountain Housing Council's website, and of course it'll be on YouTube. So just be aware that this is being recorded. And here are our partners. We are 29 partners. We're working to accelerate housing solutions, which include working on availability, affordability, and diversity of housing. Would somebody volunteer to read our meeting agreement? And if you're somebody on Zoom, we will be here in the room. Great, thank you.
Show up and bring your best ideas. Be prepared. Treat others with respect. Voice opinions and concerns. Advocate for our collaborative goals. Work collaboratively and strive for consensus. Share your expertise. Serve as an ambassador. Shall I read the hybrid agreement?
Sure, thank you.
Be patient, politely mute, and minimize side conversations.
Thanks, Teresa. So this is our first time hosting a hybrid meeting using the OWL. So I just want to give a shout out to NCCA and to the North Tahoe Leadership Program. Through the grant, they got this OWL and they've made it available to us, but it is our first time using it. And so it may be a little bit glitchy. We think it will not be, but so if anyone's on Zoom is having a hard time hearing us, please jump in and let us know. And then the minimizing side conversation is really because the OWL does pick up noise pretty well. And so those on Zoom will have a hard time hearing us. And you guys are all pros at this, so I don't need to go into more detail. So our goals for today, really, our goal is we have Ashley and Rosanna who are on Zoom with us. They are consultants from Economic and Planning Systems who did our 2023, thanks Ashley, housing needs assessment update. And so they're going to give us about a 20-minute presentation walking us through all the data. So just a reminder, we did a community survey. It was an online survey where we asked you as partners and other community organizations to push it out throughout the community. It was for anyone who lived or worked within our Tahoe Truckee Unified School District boundary. And then we, the consultants did an analysis using publicly sourced data. So they are going to go through that with us, and then we'll have about 20 to 25 minutes to ask questions and to discuss the data. And then we're just going to share out the extended activities of the Mountain Housing Council. As you know, we ended our last 3-year period in July, but the work still continues. And we hope to have time for partner updates. But if we're running close on time, then we're going to encourage you to use our website on Housing Council I think some of you are very familiar with it. I see Amy shaking her head, yes. But there is the partner hub there where you can upload your own highlight, and then you can also email it to me. And really, we just want to keep encouraging people to go to our website to see the good work that you're doing. And that is our agenda and our goals for today. And so I'm gonna turn it over to Ashley and Rosanna, who are joining us from Economic and Planning Systems. They are on Zoom. And they're gonna lead us to the next slide. So I'm gonna stop sharing and they are gonna start sharing.
Great.
And then I'm gonna ask if you can put any questions in the chat, and then we'll wait till they're done to share. And was that really loud? I think you have to go to the owl to actually turn it down. Press it. Yeah. So I'll let her start talking. If I need to turn it down, I will.
All right. Well, thank you. Good morning. While Rosanna's pulling up the presentation, I'll just start by saying I'm Ashley Canna. I'm a principal with Economic and Planning Systems. I'm joined this morning by Rosanna Wren. She's an associate also in our Oakland office, and you'll be hearing from both of us this morning. We're going to tag team a bit. And this is the third regional workforce needs assessment. The initial analysis was conducted in 2016 by another consulting firm, and then it was updated by us, by EPS in 2021, and then again in this year. And just want to sort of start off by saying, when we started this in 2021, before 2021, we were really working with the 2016 methodology, making adjustments only where necessary, because we wanted to be supportive of future updates and create as much potential to tell a trend story as possible. And the goal here in all of this is to really track the scale of the housing problem. We all know, we all feel, we see that there is a problem, but we want a data-driven way to see who is most affected, who is most vulnerable, and we want to see if the region's efforts and interventions are working, if they're effective. And while each of the updates yields interesting results and points to interesting conclusions, the true value of this exercise, I think, is going to come with future updates, at which point we'll have a clearer picture of trends and inflection points. And with that, next, please. Thanks. So our agenda this morning, for this micro portion of the meeting anyway, is pretty straightforward. We want to provide you with a little bit of background, a little bit of context, just lead off with some key findings. We want to talk to you a bit about the survey that was done. Maybe many of you took it or were a part of distributing it. We'll get into the data too, that's the regional workforce housing needs assessment. We'll talk about each of the 4 cohorts who are contributing to the needs. And then we'll start to pull out some trend pieces too, where possible. Next, please. So this is a map you know well. I don't need to say too much about it, but I think it's really important to remember that there's something powerful about this study area, right? It's multiple jurisdictions who might have much broader geographies that they're focused on, but in this effort, they're coming together and really thinking about our little geography, our study area here. And one of the things that is really important to know is that the boundaries are exactly the same as the Tahoe-Truckee Unified School District and the Airport District. And that's important because these are districts that are tracked with census data. And so there is good, solid, publicly available data that is focused really on our exact boundaries. Next, please. So there are really 2 components to the housing needs assessment. There is the survey that was distributed to both employers and employees, and the housing needs model. And with respect to the survey, what we're really trying to do is obtain real-time data on housing need and directly from the community members. Unlike when the housing needs model, we're really using third-party data. Maybe there's even a little bit of a lag. And it's publicly available, but it isn't directly from the people. We're not hearing a story directly from the people who are most affected. So the survey, as I mentioned, was distributed to both employers and employees. Rosanna will tell you more about that. And where possible, we tried to maintain questions from 2016 and 2021, again, so we can begin to tell that story over time. The model provides population estimates for the study area geography. And it's really, what we're doing is trying to estimate the scale, estimate the number of inadequately housed workforce in the study area. And we're using publicly available data sources. The caveat here is that there's always a lag with publicly available data, and they may not be focused on exactly the same points in time. So our lens is let's look at the most recently available, and that's what we've done in this model. I'll note also that when we have an exogenous event like COVID, we want to be able to see the data in real time. We want to know what are the impacts of that effect. And as we look back at 2021, it seems like, oh, that's a perfect time to be taking a look and thinking about what might have happened due to COVID. But just as the 2023 needs assessment is not quite an accurate reflection of the post-COVID point in time because of all the data lag, the 2021 data also, we've got a lag there that we need to just be aware of as we start to think about interpreting results. So next slide, please. And before getting into the details, let's start with just a very brief overview of key findings. First, our unmet housing need or demand for housing in the region declined somewhat since the 2021 needs assessment. And we'll spend a lot more time talking about that this morning, really about what unmet housing needs, what unmet housing need means. But let me briefly say that unmet housing need is comprised of 4 types of need in our study. One, it's folks who are already living and working in our study area, but they're in inadequate housing situations. They're not in housing that's really allowing them to truly engage. Second, there's people who work in the study area but live outside the study area and who would really rather be in the study area if there was appropriate housing. That means affordable, the right size, fits their lifestyle, etc. Our seasonal workers also contribute to our regional housing need, and seasonal workers face a lot of challenges finding housing that suits their requirements because it's such a diverse population with such diverse needs. And finally, the unhoused clearly have unmet housing needs, and they're a part of our study as well. So against that backdrop, the study indicates that 66% of housing units in the study area are not occupied on a full-time basis. And that ratio has not materially budged since the 2021 update. The study finds also that the most unmet need is experienced by households earning between 30 to 60% AMI and then 80 to 120% AMI. And we'll also note that while there is a lot of need in that 80 to 120% income cohort, there's federal and state subsidies that are available are most available below that 80% AMI threshold. And then finally, it just remains the case that housing issues continue to negatively affect both employees and employers in the region. Next, please. So this is a slide demonstrating sort of just current status of the existing housing inventory. And of the 35,000 existing housing units in the region, only about a third, the inverse of what I mentioned before, are occupied as primary households. The remaining units are used as second homes or vacation rentals. And relative to 2021, there are more units in the inventory now, and the ratio of households that are occupied as primary households is just a bit higher. It's a positive shift, but it isn't it's a really small shift. And I'll also note that this data does not explicitly reflect ADUs. One of the things we see is the concentration of homes in our single family category. And we know that based on surveys and just talking to people that to really better meet the needs of our community at all various life stages, at all stages of career, and across that affordability, achievable housing spectrum, we really need a greater diversity of product type. We've been talking about that. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Rosanna for the next several slides.
Okay, so I'll be discussing the community housing survey, and this was 2 surveys that was sent out to employees and employers in the area, and I believe Christina mentioned that MHC coordinated outreach with some of you to ensure that it reached a lot of your community as well. So first, just to go through an overview of the survey, there were 2 surveys, an employee one and employer one, with different with a slightly different set of questions, and this survey was completed online using the SurveyMonkey web platform. And both surveys also offered a Spanish translation to increase access to the Spanish-speaking population. The survey was left open for several weeks in April and May of this year. And in total, nearly 1,300 responses were received across both surveys, so about 1,200 of them from employees and 100 from employers. And in the employee survey, 170 responses, or around 15%, were from the Spanish language version of the survey. So on this slide, I'll go over some brief results and findings from the two surveys. So first, starting with the employee survey, we find that around 90% of the respondents who say they are renters said they had trouble finding housing in the study area. And then 53% of respondents spend more than 30% of their income on housing costs. So they would be considered housing cost burdened. And then I'll also note that when we isolate it to just the Spanish language responses, we get around 88% of those respondents saying that they're spending 30% or more on their housing costs. So that's a pretty significant difference as well. And then the third bullet on the employee survey, 35% of respondents say they have trouble finding housing that's available for year-round occupancy. So overall, it's evident in the survey that housing remains an issue in the Tahoe region and in many ways, from the lack of supply or availability, or just being able to afford a place. And even when those things line up, people might still have trouble finding something that is suitable for their lifestyle. Next, on the employer survey, 56% of employers said that they expect their number of employees to grow in the next 5 years, and 79% of employees say that the current housing conditions are detracting from their business's success. And that's just two findings from the survey, but it does show that there's an increasing need for workforce housing, and that a majority of employers are concerned that the housing conditions are affecting their ability to find and retain staff, and it's affecting their business operations, both currently and long-term as well. Next, I'll pass it on back to Ashley, and she will go over our housing needs assessment.
Great, thanks. Let's just move to the next slide. And this is the rollout of the answer. In the 2023 analysis, we found total housing need of close to 8,200 units, 8,197. You'll see that number repeated on several slides as we start to break it down and understand it in more detail. As I'd mentioned before, this is comprised of 4 cohorts. And so we'll walk through each of those, and then I'll also note over on the right, I won't go through it in detail, but we looked at sub-geographies where possible to make estimates for the town of Truckee, plus East Placer, and then East Nevada County. So with respect to the resident workers, that's our first cohort here that's highlighted. These are workers who they work in the study area and they live in the study area, but they're inadequately housed, meaning they're living in homes that are overcrowded, more than one person per room. They lack baseline kitchen or plumbing facilities, or they pay more than 30% of their monthly income towards housing costs. This number is a little bit lower than it was in 2021. Next little animation, please. Thank you. For our in-commuter category, there are some employees who work in our study area that have very long commutes. You all know this, and that can lead to a really poor quality of life. We estimate need by looking at which commuters would prefer to live in the region, but may not be able to because of reasons like cost or just lack of supply, frankly. And so in the survey, this is an area where we blended results from the survey and from the publicly available data. But in the survey, we asked respondents who are in commuters about their likelihood to move if adequate housing in the study area became available. And 55% of those who, or 55% responded they were very likely to move. And I'll note that we asked this on a graduated scale, right? So unlikely, somewhat likely, likely, very likely. And we're really just focused on the very likely respondents here, because there are lots of reasons people might be quite content to stay where they are with a commute. Seasonal workers, next, please. So examples of seasonal workers, you know this, but there are ski instructors, there are firefighters, there are forest rangers, and many of these seasonal workers are truly essential to keeping the economy going, especially during peak season, summer and winter. But there are shoulder season efforts too, of course. And seasonal workers, they may not reside in the Tahoe Truckee area permanently. And as I mentioned before, they're a really diverse group. Some of them might be students, they can be retirees, they might be folks who just sort of move around depending on their sport or their focus very intentionally. And their housing needs really differ from resident workers and in commuters who we assume want year-round housing in the area. A lot of these seasonal workers, they only need housing for a couple months, and not all rentals will accommodate that. This is one area, thanks, Rosanna. This is one area where the fact that we have a coterminous boundary with the school district is really important, because census tracks people who are working in the area based on the number of weeks of the year that they're working. So that's a good thing to know for this study and future updates. Onto our homeless, please. It's really difficult to estimate the number of homeless in a region, of course, and this is a number that will fluctuate quite a lot over time. This number is based on HUD's point in time count, and it was most recently completed in January of this year. Of these individuals, 76 are in Eastern Nevada County, 12 are in Eastern Placer County. And relative to the 2021 study, I think it's important to say this, the number of unhoused doubled. And at the time that the point in time count was collected, this year, more funding had been available and the available resources had increased. So we can't just assume that the doubling of the number is bad, certainly not good, but it could be, there's another way to see it, which is that more people are able to seek out shelter because of the expanding resources. So people in need are able to seek out the resources and get the help that they need. But this estimate is complicated, of course. Next, please. So some quick additional insights into those facing unmet housing needs. Of the resident workers, these are folks, again, who have housing, but by objective measures, not their own judgment, by objective measures, their housing situation's inadequate and perhaps obvious, but we see the lower income households most affected in this category. Of the in-commuters, this group faced costly and time-consuming commutes, but we don't assume that everyone who works in the study area wants to live in the study area. So that's why we've really focused again on that very, very likely response. With respect to the seasonal workers, they're really the most challenging to quantify because they're such a diverse cohort. There's not one housing type or one format that meets all needs. And one item to note is that while we've reflected the seasonal workers here as households, their need can also be expressed in terms of beds. Think like college dorm style, for example, where you might have two singles in a room. And when expressed in that manner, we estimate the need for 2,300 beds, 2,300. And the homeless, I really spoke about this cohort on the prior slide. Some of these folks are chronically homeless, others are seeking safety, really, like escaping potentially abusive or otherwise dangerous housing situations, but hard to categorize. So next, let's walk through some of the other findings that emerge when we break this down. This graphic you have seen, it's familiar, it's called the bridge, and it presents the regional need by income. And income is expressed as a percentage of area median income. So for reference, the AMI for a 4-person household in the study area is about $113,000 a year. So that's for a 4-person household. And it varies a bit between Nevada County and Placer County, but it's about 113,000. And up to 80% AMI is the orange segment. Between 80 and 195% is the blue segment. And then the red is above 195%. And within each of these segments, we break that down a little bit more further on too. But within each of the income segments, the total need is indicated, and then the types of housing most suitable is indicated as well. So for example, rentals and ADUs may be appropriate at any income level, but supportive housing, for example, is really most appropriate at the lower end of the spectrum, whereas home ownership is seen at the above moderate and upper end. Next, please. The objective of this slide is to show all the workforce housing or workforce households in the study area and demonstrate in which income categories were facing the greatest need in more granularity than the prior slide showed. So the gap numbers, which are the, I guess, a little bit more muted, the numbers up at the top, those gap numbers all add up to the 8,197 total need. And this shows that while some income categories are more adequately housed than others, you can certainly see that as you move up the income scale, there's still an unmet need in each of these categories. And as I mentioned before, up until the blue, right, like all the orange bars, there are subsidies available to help with this type of housing, but still to assist, it would just be an assist, and that represents about 50% of the unmet need. So about 50% of the unmet need can be assisted with subsidies if they're available. Next slide, please. So this year, we were also asked to evaluate the need by age and by race where possible. And with respect to age, we pooled the age of survey respondents who indicated that they are dissatisfied with their current housing situation. And so what we see here is that those who are dissatisfied with their housing situation fall disproportionately into the 30 to 49 year age cohort. And this is a group that tends to be, more established in their careers or mid-careers, probably looking for opportunities to establish themselves in their communities, raising families, buying homes if possible. Hard to do in the study area with the home prices and rents that we're seeing. So these findings resonate. Next slide, please. And with respect to race, and like with age, the patterns largely follow area demographics, but we do see a disproportionately larger share of Latino and Hispanic households reporting dissatisfaction with their housing through the survey. And I'll just note for information here that all other races and ethnicities include African American, American Indian, or Alaskan Native, Asian, Native Hawaiian, or other Pacific Islander. So the census categories that we're used to seeing. Next, please. And we also evaluated housing needs according to, should probably move the order of this, but we also evaluated housing needs according to unit size to help inform what unit sizes are most needed in the region. This is information that public agencies and developers might find useful. And what we see here is that 1 and 2 bedroom units represent nearly 72% of the total need. And off to you, Rosanna.
Okay. All right, so I'll talk through the trendline analysis and look at how our 2023 results compare to what we saw in previous years of this study in 2016 and 2021. So this is the 3rd year of the study, and so with that, we can start to put together some trends to see how housing conditions in the area have changed since 2016, and I'll walk through a few charts that highlight trends coming from our survey, our housing needs model, and some third-party data sources. Ideally, this is the kind of analysis that can be done on a more frequent basis to generate more consistent data and trends. So starting with this slide, it just shows the regional unmet housing need, and that the leftmost green bar is that 8197 number that Ashley talked through. You can see how it compares with the total unmet need in previous years. So, this is a decline from 9,500 in 2021 and from over 12,000 in 2016. And when we break that out for each of our 4 cohorts, we do see a few different results in terms of the trends in the individual cohorts. The one that really stands out the most is for the in-commuter households, and that's really largely driving the overall declining trends that we see. The in-commuter cohort was, once at almost 7,000 in 2016, but that went down in 2021 to around 3,500, and in this year's estimate, went down again to around 2,500. There's a few contributing factors to this, and we'll also cover this a little bit more in an upcoming slide, but it's mainly due to the estimating methodology changing after the first year, so that contributes to that really large drop between the first and second year, and then over time the number of in-commuters into the region has gone down. And then on this slide, the other thing I'll note, and Ashley talked through this a little bit as well, is the homeless cohort. That count of homeless doubled from 2021 to 2023. And we think a potential explanation for that is the additional funding to support people who left abusive households and were able to stay in a shelter. So during the point in time count, there were just more individuals who otherwise would not have been counted in this cohort in previous years. Okay, so this chart shows the median home sale prices in Truckee, and you can see that the trend of housing prices have been rising over the last decade, but really started to spike towards the end of 2020, and in 2022 reached that high of almost 1.4 million. For the most recent data point that we have, it's still pretty high at 1.1 million. So this is just one trend that's showing just how severe housing and especially housing affordability has become in Truckee. And we got this data from Redfin and their monthly housing market database, and we wanted to include it because it's one of the more real-time updating sources that we have to really see how our region's housing market is doing. Okay, so here we're looking more closely at one of the findings from our survey, and that percent of overburdened households who are paying more than 30% of their income towards housing. As you might recall from the survey findings slide, 53% of respondents in this year's employee survey said they paid 30% or more, and that's down from 77% and 68% in 2021. But either way, it's still that housing cost burden really remains a large reason for housing dissatisfaction in the area. We wanted to also check this against our census data as well, and census reports that around 35% of households have a housing cost burden. So, potentially the survey might have a bit of selection, like survey respondent bias, and people self-selecting into responding to the survey, MHC's survey about housing issues in the Tahoe area, because they are currently experiencing difficulties with their housing. Okay, and then for this slide, we're looking more closely at the trend of in commuters, which you saw had the largest drop among the 4 cohorts in terms of housing need. And as mentioned previously, in commuter housing need is estimated by taking that total number of in commuters as well as from the survey, that percentage of in commuters who said that they would be very likely to move to the study area. And if we look at the trend since 2016, so those blue bars, we see that the total number of in commuters into the region has gone down. And then the green line, that percentage of in commuters who'd be likely to move has also gone down. And we only have that data for 2023, 2021 and 23 from the survey. So that's why it's only those 2 years. But those 2 factors in combination are contributing to that overall large drop in commuter housing need. And and so one possible reason for that decline is that since the pandemic, there's more workplaces that are allowing hybrid or remote work schedules. So that's bringing down the number of in commuters, but also the people, people might also just be more accepting of where they're living now and therefore are less strongly inclined to want to move closer to their workplace because they don't have to face such a, long and stressful commute anymore. And so next, I'll turn it over to Ashley to wrap things up on our presentation.
Yeah, so let's wrap this up and get to questions. Thank you, Rosanna. So what did we learn? Well, the study area's workforce is really varied and faces varied housing needs. And it's not a one solution fits all. All the various efforts are really critical. We also, the survey data continues to reveal that employees and employers are struggling. And so it's just a call back to action. The work that you're all doing is really important. We see that the unmet housing need has declined since the last assessment. We caution against seeing it as dramatic improvement. Just until we have more data, more of a trend. Because of the lags of data, it can be a little bit hard to tell a very linear story about cause and effect here. And that gets to this final point, which is, the regular tracking of data can really help MHC and all of you learn more about which programs are most effective and where are the ongoing gaps and where are policy needs. And with that, let me turn it over to questions, or back to you, Christina, I guess, to facilitate that.
Thank you, Ashley. Thank you, Ivana. So we have about 20 minutes for questions. And so if you have specific questions to ask Ashley or Ivana, this is your opportunity to do so. And we'll also just open it up to discussion, how that resonated with you. So let's start first with any questions since we have them. Teresa.
Forgive me if I missed this, but were we looking, or can you say anything about data related to the total workforce in the region? As we're seeing those drops, I'm just curious if the total shifted at all.
Yeah, thank you. We do have that information. I might need to come back to you with it and go take a look for it.
Okay, thank you.
If I can piggyback on that, this isn't really a question, it's as much a comment. I think that total workforce number will tell us whether the in commuters went away or which I suspect, just anecdotally, right? And are no longer interested in being here because they know they're never going to be able to afford to live here. And that is like anecdotally what we're hearing from people working to hire in Sierra Business Council.
Yeah, people giving up, basically.
Yeah, they've given up.
Yeah. Hi, Steve.
Hey, Ashley, good to see you again.
Ashley, can you remind me in the housing burden numbers, how homeowners insurance might play a role in that or not?
The housing burden number is supposed to be reflective of all housing costs. So if you're a homeowner, it should be, of course, your principal and mortgage or principal and interest, but also homeowners insurance, HOA dues, utilities, that sort of thing.
Thank you.
I have a quick question
Yeah.
on the homeless numbers, you talked about people kind of extricating themselves from difficult positions and driving that total unhoused number up. We track that number pretty carefully at the county, kind of have our own thoughts and feelings about where that is, particularly East County numbers alarming to me, but can you describe your methodology or what you just, the reasoning that you used to support kind of what you said there a little bit more?
Yeah, I may want to turn that back to Christina, who I think has more information. We, of course, did not do the point in time count. We're just reflecting it. But Christina, I think you had more insights.
Yeah, those are the numbers we received from the county. And they give us the unsheltered and sheltered number, and where the biggest increase was in the sheltered number. And we have heard that that is because there were more resources available to help people who may have been in abusive situation.
Under-resourced and then gotten involved in some sort of wraparound service, reported that service offering and help and kind of now entered the system. Is that
Yeah.
essentially what I'm understanding?
Yeah, so it's really the shelter number that went up.
Okay.
And to like just paint a more qualitative picture, if you can imagine during a pandemic, being sheltered in place in a situation that might not have been ideal going into it, and maybe getting the resources on the ground in the community to invite people to come out of a difficult home situation. So this is all just me kind of piecing things together. I don't know if that's the truth, but I do think that there's something at play there.
Okay, thank you.
And I should say that the numbers also came from our county partner, but they got them from Connecting Point that went into the
Yeah,
COC.
yeah, they look reasonable and correct to me. I just was that some of the assumptions associated with why the numbers are driven up, because we see just kind of from the big picture, just more people entering the system, right?
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
a statewide.
And we didn't reflect it on the slide, the like number of unsheltered and sheltered, but I have that for you, data, so I can share that with you.
Okay, cool.
We'll go to Brett in the Zoom.
Oh, thanks, Anna.
Good morning. Both the town of Truckee and Placer have passed policies in order to manage this second home / STR inventory. Was there any analysis on the effectiveness of those policies?
The publicly available data that we're tracking isn't going to reflect anything that's taken place in that very recent past. So that's just an unfortunate reality associated with this sort of like census data that we're relying on in many cases. I think I imagine, if this update were done again in 2 years, you would start to be able to see that. But in any case, it's pretty difficult with the way that we've set up this model to really attribute to a particular program. So I think the survey might be the best way in the future to track the effectiveness of those sorts of programs. Unsatisfying answer there, sorry.
No, that's fine. I understand.
We did ask a displacement question in the survey. We had been displaced the last 3 years and the reasons why. So we do have that data. And a lot of it was like, because it was actually like, I think 15% of the population, moved within the region. That's why they were new and had moved in the last 3 years. But we did ask, was it because, you lost your housing, and that was not the highest response. And all this data we can share with you. So if there's any specific questions, something that you're not seeing here, please let me know.
I have a question. Was there much of a change when you break it down by the AMIs? From memory, it seemed like that was pretty similar to 2 years ago, but just curious if we saw any difference in needs at various income levels.
Yeah. Sorry, I have a slide here to share.
Late last night, Christina was thinking the very same thing and put together a slide that might be useful.
And
hid it, but now I can't figure out how to unhide it. I'm sorry, I forgot how to do it. Uh-huh.
Yeah. Right.
Thank you. So based on the bridge score of 0 to 80% AMI and then 80 to 195 and then 195 and higher, this is bundled up how it's looked over the last 3 years. And so in 2016, we only did unmet need up to 120, so that's why you don't see a bar there for 2016 and the blue or the red, but these are, you can see a huge drop actually in the 0 to 80 from when we did this survey in 2021 to 2023. It stayed relatively the same in the 80 to 195, and then you can see it actually rose 5 higher.
It would be interesting for more data to add units that have come online during that time. Just to compare, like, has that made a difference in those numbers? Again, reflecting maybe some of the folks in the lower incomes have also left the area. But that would be interesting.
Yeah, I agree. There's like a lots of ways we can slice and dice the
Yeah.
data.
I'm just
We can
curious
see
about-
some,
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, we can see some of that looking at the existing inventory over time. I didn't want to focus on it so much because I don't know what it means, but we actually saw a loss of multi-units in multifamily structures between 2021 and 2023. So more to dig into there. And that's not the same thing as the households, right? It's units as opposed to households, but there's definitely something to explore there.
Piggybacking on that, I agree. I think it would be important for us to be tracking the units that have been introduced into the market, the type of units, so that we can keep an eye on the diversity piece, the AMI target for each of those units. And dare I say, not trying to be controversial, we measure units that aren't coming online, that are just kind of on hold and hanging out and waiting because they're either permitted, like where are they in the system of the pipeline? So I think there's something interesting with just when we look at this data, whether it's 12,000 or 8,000 and over this period of time, the whole thing is we need more housing and we're feeling it. We're feeling it in our businesses. We're feeling it everywhere. And so this is great for us to continue to like capture this data. And I love that we're breaking it down more granular than when we started, including age and race and continued focus on AMI. But I think we need to kind of also look deeply at the units themselves that are coming online and making sure they're triangulating to the need. And I think that there could be a lot more robust conversation. So that's my teaser.
Can I also just, so this was done in April and May, and it was done in the same period for 21 and 2016. Is that correct?
2021.
For sure.
I think it was a little earlier in 2016, wasn't it?
I was just gonna say, I think the data would look a lot different if we asked these questions in February
Okay.
or January, when we have a huge influx
Yeah.
of seasonal workers and a transient workforce. April and May, a lot of them are already gone, and I think the data would look a lot different.
And that has been our goal to get out in February. So next time we definitely will try to.
I mean, you want to compare apples to apples,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
I'm not suggesting to shift the time frame if we want to get consistent data over time. I'm just offering that it might look a lot different if we asked it in the middle of the term.
Yeah, I guess what maybe we can just anecdotally add into the sets of others, like, would you guys say, hey, you'd be quite.
We'd be open to doing it, but we haven't for the past couple of years.
Although, if I might add to what Lindsay and Stacy were saying, I think this issue of like, what is the dashboard for us to measure against, right? That the housing needs assessment data is a big chunk of that, and it's incredibly valuable, right? But that AMI piece and tracking how AMI is changing over time, total number of units piece, the gap in the total number of units compared to the unmet need. But clearly, we didn't build 4,000 units in the last, like, 6 years, right? I mean, I just did a calc, I think we built like 650 units, okay, so, so the reality is something's happening there, some people are leaving, AMI is going up, right? So, and we're not building the units, that, that number of units hanging out there is a super important number, because most of our success in the last 5 years was a big chunk of units that were hanging out there from 10 years of work in the previous decade, and the rail yard and the, all these different projects, right? So that, like, that number of units hanging out there because we haven't processed them, or we can't get to them quickly enough, or money's too expensive, right, is super important,
And I will say that the pipeline that was ready to go, if you will, as Mountain Housing Council was launching, was a pipeline that we all actively started to engage in. So, at the first Mountain Housing Council meeting, I think it was Alexis who was like, Truckee Artist Lofts is waiting for help. And we were looking at Ray's Crossing, and we were looking at all those in the pipeline, trying to figure out, does it need money? Does it need political or public will? Where are the barriers to that pipeline? And I think we need to keep looking at that pipeline to figure out, how do we navigate with each other?
Precisely, because all of that was stuff that all of us individually were working on before, that got collectively put together. But it has a tendency to come in these pulses based on the cost of money.
Yes.
And
readiness, right?
yeah, exactly. So like, we need to be ready for the next pulse, right? Of housing into the region. And I'm kind of curious about where that is.
So, question for my own education around this, maybe perhaps, but like, how is the number of total units available calculated? Because when I think about what's happened over the last 3 years in terms of projects and programs that have become available and online, I think of like leased locals, both in Truckee and in Eastern Placer County. I think of private employer efforts. Through my knowledge base of the businesses in North Lake Tahoe alone, we have significant investment from our private employers, some who are in the room, the larger employers and the smaller businesses as well, that have probably brought online hundreds and hundreds of units together. Maybe 100 from a large employer and a dozen from a small employer, but you put those numbers together and you're probably getting in the neighborhood of 1,000 units. So has that been taken into consideration, or how is that measured? And how do we revisit that number and make sure that that's fresh and input into this?
Yeah, the number of housing stock reserves. I mean, it's a goal that we wanted to
It's
measure.
like an unlocked, it's not
Yeah.
just what we're building, but how do we take the existing inventory?
And I think there's been a significant move there in the last 3 years from what I've seen.
And yet that 66% number doesn't really budge.
That's what my
sorry.
question, that didn't change a lot. Yeah, that's curious too. Yeah, if they got unlocked where from, because 66% didn't seem materially different.
So how do we, I think the question we're kind of getting at is, how do we begin to really put a methodology behind the unlocking activities that are happening, right? Because it's multiple employers, multiple public programs that are trying to unlock existing inventory for the workers. I think it's a good question. It's really hard to, because it's in that private sector space, and you also don't see certain indicators like pulling permits, right? You don't see certain things that are happening there. So maybe it's collaborating across the public agencies on the programs, and then maybe it's a business opt-in thing to help us understand that, through the chambers and the alliance. Thank you.
Yeah.
And maybe important to not be too dismayed by the data there too, looking at the existing inventory, that is census data. And so the data that's reflected in there is the 2017 to 2021 ACS survey. So we're not seeing this real time, just finalized sort of, or, permit pulled and just finalized sort of activity that you might be hearing about. So there, we need a bit of a combination of, the baseline data that we get from census, and then some real time tracking about, permitting activity and finals.
Yeah, I just had a question, of the 8,000 unmet units and the projection of what's in the pipeline and then what could be in the pipeline versus unlocking. Like, is there a estimate or, you know, is it 25% that could be filled in the pipeline versus unlocking? And because those are two different like efforts in terms of building and programs like these locals and stuff. And so thinking in the future of how to, you know, go down those two tracks.
So one of the things that we did at TTCF before Mountain Housing Council was, it was kind of like simultaneously, and some of you'll remember this, is we did a second homeowner survey to figure out what the potential capacity of second homeowners would be to unlock their homes. And I think that there's some value. I think Placer County has done that work. I think others, you know, are trying to figure out how to really get a sense, like get our arms around that potential group, because at the time we identified a unique subset of second homeowners that were really kind of income focused on their homes. So they didn't necessarily come here with the skiing. If maybe it was third generation home and family, you know, is scattered and they don't really use it as much. And or it's truly an income asset for them and they're just going to use it in that way. And it was about 11% of the second homeowner housing stock. And so you can start to kind of back into a number that even if it sounds like 11% actually could make a huge dent in the unlocking numbers for us.
Can you remind me, has the need lowered for housing stock because of the census data showing that the demographic has shifted? So the socioeconomic demographic of the region based on the census data do we know that since 2016 that's changed?
The income has right, exactly. What you're saying is, do people have more wealth? And so they're like in our demographic reach, like has that increased at a level?
I think I'm curious, like looking at the blocks of populations, what we're calling 30 to 60% of AMI, have some of those people we're trying to deduce, have they left the community? Like when we look at the overall population and income levels, what do we see?
Ashley, I think she might have that with the photo workforce.
Yeah, I think that so it wasn't anything that we put into the presentation, and we'll need to go extract it and get back to you about it. But we do have census information sort of broken down by income group. So you can see those shifting trends over time for the district boundary. Information's available. There is a little bit of a disconnect between the way that census breaks down incomes and the way that the HCD income limits are sort of organized, but you can get a sense. We can pull that census data for you.
Yeah, let's go to Erin and then we'll go to Brett online and then we'll wrap up.
I was just curious about the survey respondents and wondering how that may have differed from prior years when surveys were done. Did you have a larger number of people? Were the demographics different? Just wondering the comparison there.
I believe we had not quite as many respondents this time around as last time. We did end up leaving the survey open a little bit longer to get closer to the number of respondents from 2 years ago. And we had, Christine and Rosanna, I might need your help with this, but did we have more Spanish speaker respondents this time?
Yeah, that's correct.
I believe we did, yeah.
Partnered with Sierra Community Housing Outreach. Got it.
Yeah.
And that is also correct that we had lower number of respondents each year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And all of the demographic information about respondents is in the surveys, and we can make sure that that's available to everybody.
Thank you.
Brett, we'll go to you.
Thank you. Ashley, I'm wondering, based on the data, if you believe we should be incentivizing, whether it be unlocking or building 1 and 2 bedroom. It seems that when we look at that inventory mix that you put up that we're treating all the inventory with our policies pretty similarly, when in fact it seems that the need assessment is a little bit more on that 1 and 2 bedrooms. So I'd like to get your feedback on that.
I think we need all of it.
Yeah.
You know, so like like focusing across the board is the right thing to do, but we do see a little bit more of a need in those 1 and 2 bedrooms. It fills more of the gap, but I think it's all really necessary.
Great, thanks.
Well, thank you, guys. More to come. And I also just wanted to, I was like, oh, we're pressed on time. I didn't thank everyone for joining us today. So thank you, Ashley and Anna, for joining us. We did record this, and then we are going to record separately a presentation, but on Zoom that they will just give, that we will make available on our website so that you can watch later. We've sent you the memo, but we have a lot more data. So we'll have a slide deck, very much like we did in 2021, that we'll post on our website, so you can have access to that. We have shared with East Placer County and Truckee all of the data, so all of the publicly available data that Ashley and Rosanna sourced, and then all of the survey data. So if anybody else wants to take a look at that, please let me know. And then, as I said, you know, we can kind of cross-tabulate it in lots of different ways. So thank you, Ashley and Rosanna.
Great, thank you all.
Thank you. And so we have about 10 minutes to go over some extended activities of the Mountain Housing Council, and then we should have time for partner updates. So I will share my slide. And Stacey and I will tag team this. Okay. Sorry, I'm gonna know my mouse and move. Okay. Yeah, so as I said, we technically wrapped up Mountain Housing Council in July of 2023. And in that wrap up process, we surveyed you to get your feedback on if MHC should continue, what sort of activities you would like to see. And so these are your responses. Highest priority based on responses was to continue the state advocacy, and then the facilitation and convening data and storytelling, community education, and bringing the funders network together, which after this last conversation, it sounds like that actually is higher in priority, because that is one of the things that we do is we do look at the pipeline. And so if we do want to start tracking more to pipeline to needs assessment, then that is a great group to be doing that. And so we do have some residual funds in the Mountain Housing Council, and so we're able to continue activities after that close date of June 30th, 2023. And so one of the extended activities is state advocacy. We're currently in the middle of a 2-year legislative cycle. Thank you so much to Steve Frisch and the Sierra Business Council, who have really been leading our policy working group, and to all of the members here who participate on that working group team. Based on our lobbying days down in Sacramento, we did meet with legislative staff, and in those conversations focused on regional housing finance authorities. And so we're able to write into some amendments with SB 440, which passed the Senate and is now stuck in Assembly and will go into the next year in the legislative cycle. But if you haven't been following along with us, SB 440 is a regional housing finance authority bill by Nancy Skinner, Senator Skinner. And we wrote into those amendments the ability to help us set a sub-region AMI, which in our region would allow for financing potentially up to 150, 160% AMI. But also what it does is it gives us guidelines on for how regional finance housing authorities work. And it allows the special districts to play a role in that. And it could potentially allow for bonding if it were to pass, which is a pretty big deal. So we're gonna keep our eye on that. We're gonna keep bird dogging that. And then you know, our next steps to close out the year is to do a written report to the legislators that we do have a relationship with, and scope some of the 23-24 priority bills. A lot of them are going to just continue on until the next legislative cycle. So we definitely appreciate all of Steve's efforts in this and the policy working group team. And we will explore contract after the end of the year, moving forward.
Right, because we're in the middle of the session, so it feels a little awkward to just kind of stop.
To walk away.
Yeah, we're good. But it, you know, has implications for the body of this group and how we can move what's next. But what we have talked to Steve and SBC about is a continuation through the end of this calendar year, so that we don't really lose the momentum, especially when we have such an important piece of legislation on the table that hopefully will impact our lovely JPA group, as well as embedded a different AMI level. So, you know, it's like the sneaky Trojan horse in a bill to really get the state thinking about AMI differently. And so we're really hoping that this will pass so that we can kind of now go back to that and reference it in other types of programs and policies. Thank you.
Do you have time for me to make just a
Yeah,
few
of
quick
course. Yeah, yeah.
observations? Number one, you thanked the policy working group participants. I want to thank them personally. I've worked closely with many of them over the last 4 or 5 years, and I really appreciated that. Number two, I think, you know, one thing to keep in mind about this is that this is a huge issue statewide. We are a tiny place. We feel big when we're here, but we're actually right. So partnership has been the key strategy here, and I think we really have elevated the profile of our region and our regional issues, not just in housing, but many of the things housing touches, like climate, like wildfire insurance, like all of these different issues, right? And my third observation would be that that often these things require multi-year efforts and tough compromises in order to get the policy and the funding that you need coming in to the region, right? And that's hard for people, that's often hard for people to do, but we have, I think, made a lot of progress, you know? And like that idea of missing middle housing is rising at the state. Like they see that as almost as equal a challenge as affordable housing now, even though not all the advocacy organizations have gone there yet, right? And I think they also see this issue that housing is not an urban problem, it's also a rural problem, and that's real progress, so.
Yeah, I will say too, when we went to testify at the Capitol, the connection to climate was definitely made. And so I think that is something that you have been stressing that we work on too, that housing and climate are very interrelated. I'm gonna keep moving us on. Hopefully we can wrap this up in 5 minutes so we can do partner updates. So data and storytelling, the needs assessment, we are just starting to roll it out. We've rolled it out to you guys. This was really our opportunity to kind of ground truth it and see how the data felt to you. Our next step is to put it on the website, like I said, to issue a press release, and then you know, we can do community presentations. We can meet with you individually if you want to go through any of the data. And then ideally, I think we have like a small issue brief with CCTT on it. So, and then future assessments, we've been discussing that as well. It would continue, I think, very similarly with the survey and the publicly sourced data. But we're talking about doing it every other year assessment.
And we're still open to that, but it is a big body of work. The good news is we have raised money outside of our Mountain Housing Council partnership to go for the next study survey combo. And Jen, I really appreciate you kind of calling up the timing on that. And so maybe we'll look at not this February, but next February. So we're really trying to get a sense of like how our partners use this data and when the right time is and the right methodologies to include some of the things that you guys offered up today. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you. And then another piece of the data and storytelling is just an encapsulating video to kind of describe the regional collaboration that has taken place here at Mountain Housing Council. I hear from outside partners all the time that we have such strong collaboration in our region, and that's really not seen anywhere else. I was on a phone call last week actually with somebody from St. Helena, and they wanted to know, like, how does this partnership work? What do you guys do? And I was explaining it all, and they're like, wow, so it's the collaboration piece that's your secret sauce. that's why you guys have been so successful, and I like that it's our secret sauce. So this video will just kind of encapsulate that, so another activity that we're considering as we extend into the end of the year. And then community education and engagement, so we're exploring some partnerships right now to help bolster communication efforts so that our community is more aware of all the great housing progress and programs and policies that are now occurring, and even just public meetings when housing is on the agenda. And so that will be an offering of an extended activity. And then updating some of our policy papers. And so specifically, we're looking at the ADU policy paper and the achievable local housing. There's been a lot of progress since those papers were written, and so we want to include all the updates. So that these are a resource that we can include when we're talking to legislators, or that you can use within your agencies. And I'm gonna let you take this.
Okay, so, you know, what's next with Mountain Housing Council and TTCF and figuring out our role in this work? I have to say, I'm grateful that we have been able to slow down and pause a little bit after a 2-3-year term, 3-year run, 6 years total, about a year and a half leading up to it, and just kind of pause and look around and see what's left. Who's picking up different pieces of this work? Who's best positioned? What are their roles? And what we don't want to let drop. And so I hope today, and she was calling it our final meeting, I was calling it our reunion tour. There might be a comeback tour, who knows? I think what you need to know is that TTCF recognizes that housing is still significant. And we don't think our work is done, and we don't think this region is done in this work. But we do have, you know, a commitment to a higher order of the TTCF mission, which is serving our whole community across a lot of different issues that our community faces. And I'm really pleased to see a lot of new faces in the room that are either in new positions or new organizations. And so I think it's our job to really reflect what's happening. And this partnership is unique and it's really powerful. And TTCF doesn't want to see us stop talking about housing. But we have to figure out what our role is in. And so we're in the process of a strategic plan. We are continuing to do the important work with the residual funds. There will probably be some at the end of what Christina just walked us through. It's not so big, it's going to change the world, but it'll be something that we'll bring back to our funding partners to say, you know, what's next? Where do we go with this? But right now, we still feel like we're delivering on the promise of what we started with this. And so we'll have a final budget, we'll engage the partners, and we'll roll out whatever that next offering is. And we just ask for patience while TTCF figures that out. But come to us with your questions about what we're putting out there. And know we're still here to highlight your work. So that website is going to maintain activity so that the community has a place to see what's going on. It's up to you to share with us what you're doing so we can do that. And then in our storytelling work, we're going to be navigating to you to make sure that those funds are really highlighting either agenda items that you're taking on within your organization, or actually programs and policies you're rolling out. So that's my offering. I don't have a crystal ball, but I'm not worried that this work is going away. It's clearly still a huge need in our community and across the state and across our country. And we are being lifted up by a lot of outside partners that we've done something pretty special here. So I'm hoping that the video itself will capture that.
Great, and so we're gonna 15 seconds left. We're gonna read some partner updates, and I will share the website, but I'll pull it up while we go. So I just want to recognize Heidi very quick to kick us off. So Heidi Alstead was with the Martis Fund previously, left that role about 2 years ago, less than, and is now the new executive director of the Truckee Tahoe Workforce Housing Agency, or we may hear it called the JPA. And so I just wanted to recognize that. Congratulations, Heidi. And if you want to give us a quick update about the JPA.
Yeah.
Too.
Well, thank you. It's good to be back on the reunion tour.
Yeah.
It's good to see everybody and super excited for this next iteration and really working on the implementing the 5-year strategic plan for the GPA. So looking forward to working with everybody here and connecting with you all. See what's been going on while I was gone for a little bit. Yeah, so thanks again.
Yeah, of course, we're glad you're back. And then as we're talking about the expanded housing capacity in the region, I'd like to turn it over to Erin. Would you like to give us just a really quick update on the housing hub?
Absolutely. Hi, everyone. Erin Casey, and I'm just going to share a little bit about the housing hub. I've been working very closely with Stacy, Christina, and Tony with the North South Community Alliance, among other groups in the region, to bring the housing hub concept to life, which we talked about here in this venue, as well as with the Tiger team. And so we are now in the process of getting a legal entity formed. We're hoping to have that done this week. The nonprofit status will come later. But we're moving in that direction. We have actively recruited board members, so we're excited about that. A couple more meetings to finalize some additional participation there, but really moving in that direction, and going to focus initially on building an ADU program that's very similar to Hello Housing's Hello ADU program that's been very successful in the Bay Area and is expanding across that region right now. We have funding support from the North Tahoe Community Alliance, which is huge. They're also going to incubate the housing hub for 2 years. So they'll provide office space, fiscal support, administrative support, among other things. And then the Community Foundation is also a funding partner, as well as the Martis Fund, who awarded a grant to focus on the ADU component of the program and to develop a fee backfill program that will make developing housing a little bit easier for those that find those costs to be very challenging in terms of getting something done. So I'm very excited about that. Really want something that has come out of all of this work that's been going on for so many years, and so excited to take that vision and make it real and a reality, and work with Heidi and the Workforce Housing Agency, as well as many of you in the room, to bring this organization to life and ensure that we are able to support all of the goals that we have to address the housing needs that were just described in the report. So thank you for the opportunity to share that.
Thank you. Then I'll piggyback to NCCA. Tony, you've got a lot going on. Just a little bit.
We've got just a little bit. I think, as many of you know, we rolled out our Community Vitality and Economic Health Investment Program recently, which has 4 different kind of funding grant cycles to it. And the first cycle we undertook was our sponsorship cycle, which was a 3-year funding cycle that applicants could come and apply for. We ended up just at our board of directors meeting this week or last week, making a recommendation on 17 projects and programs in the region for a total of $20 million that are going to go out to the community. We're super excited about that. Roughly 39% of those funds are going to workforce housing projects and programs in Eastern Placer County. So we're thrilled to that. The match funds that were involved in this, we're able to leverage about an additional $35 million. So a total investment over the next 3 years coming to Eastern Placer County with $55 million. About 43% of those funds are going to be going to housing projects and programs, workforce housing specific. Just super excited about that. We will be now moving the TOT recommended dollars over to Placer County Board of Supervisors for final approval and expenditure of the TOT funds. We have 2 different kind of funds we manage. If you didn't know, in that process, the TOT funds that we make recommendation on the Placer County Board of Supervisors for final expenditure. And then we have the Tourism Business Improvement District funds that we manage at the NTCA. And then when those go to our board, those are our finally approved for expenditure there. So we've got the TBID projects that are ready to go, and we're starting the contract process with them. And then we'll move along with our partnership county on the TOT projects and investments. So super excited there. I'd also like to highlight with regard to our entire grant framework program. You know, as many of you know, we've been in transition at the NTCA over the past 18 months or so, moving from a purely destination marketing organization to a destination stewardship organization. And you know, we've had changes in funding source, changes in org chart, changes in purpose. And the org chart was big, and we finally hired our last person in the evolution of our organization, and that is Tara Hetz. She is going to be our grant framework manager, overseeing all of our grant funding cycles. So we're super excited about that, to have her in-house. And if you don't know Tara, we came across her as we worked on a regional destination stewardship plan with over 17 different stakeholders around the basin here in Truckee to develop that regional destination stewardship plan. So she worked for the company Crest that we had contracted with to bring that program on. So she's got some tremendous insights, not only in our region here, but also work in 4 different communities around the United States in conjunction with ours. So she brings kind of a different perspective of not only what's going on in our community, but what's going on in the larger communities around the country. She speaks 4 languages as well. So if you've got a different language besides English, chances are you can do it.
Thank you, Tony, and just want to make note that annual grant cycle is coming up. It was scheduled to be in the fall, but that's gonna be pushed back a bit. But we will make sure to keep everyone here informed on that annual grant cycle.
And it shouldn't be pushed back too far. We just wanted to take a quick moment to survey both our committee members who participated in the process and our applicants as well, to just kind of see if there's anything that we can take from a learning perspective from the sponsorship side and apply it to the Eagle grant side to make it better and more improved and easier for everyone.
Okay. And I'm recognizing we have about 7 minutes, and I know the town of Truckee, Lynn, may have to jump, so I'm gonna go to Lynn on Zoom, and then I know Karen also wanted to get an update, and then we'll go to Karen.
Great, thank you so much. I will go fast, and if there's anything I missed, someone else from the town can fill in. I just wanted to update that the Truckee Home Access Program, our deed restriction purchase program, is still ongoing. We've already closed on a few houses this fiscal year, but we do still have some funding left. And we have workshops coming up, including one on the 28th of September. All these workshops are virtual, but the one on the 28th of September is going to be hosted only in Spanish. So it's a great opportunity for Spanish speaking community members to learn more about this program. And we do have a number of the documents and some of the website translated into Spanish as well. So I'm going to put a link to the THAP workshops in the chat. And if you could share that with your constituents, I'd really appreciate that. The second big news we have from the town is we have accessory dwelling unit master plans. We partnered with Nevada County and Placer County, among a few other jurisdictions, on these affordable housing master plans, and they're available on our website. We're going to have some more streamlining available soon, but we want to just let people know that the master plans are on the website, putting a link to that in the chat as well. And my final update is at council on Tuesday, we allocated our first 2 short-term rental workforce, or first 3 short-term rental workforce housing token pilot program tokens. This is a program you may have heard about where we, it's very new and innovative. We can't find any other jurisdictions that are doing it, but in exchange for some of our limited transient occupancy tax certificates, we are offering people opportunity to deed restrict workforce housing. So we had an open we had an RFP with a response period this spring, and we got a couple of applications, and council just allocated those tokens on Tuesday. We still have some tokens available, so we'll be moving to an open application sometime in the next couple months, and we'll send out updates when that application is open. All right, thank you.
Karen.
Thanks. Hi, everybody. Karen Fink from TRPA. I just wanted to let everybody know about a couple of opportunities for input on some important code amendments that the TRPA and our partners have been working on to make it more financially feasible to build affordable housing, including workforce housing. And throughout the summer, we've been we've been engaging the community. You might have seen us at the farmers market, and we've been meeting with different community groups to gather input on these amendments. They really focus on looking at what are kind of the parcel level zoning rules that really affect the size and the number of units, and hence the cost of multifamily housing and accessory dwelling units, and how can we lower that cost. So to get at that kind of diversity of housing types that Ashley was mentioning in her presentation. So we would really love to hear from people on this. We have 2 meetings coming up that'll kind of go over what we've heard and where we are now with the code amendments. So September 19th is a webinar at 5 p.m. and I can put the link in the chat. And then September 27th, we'll be having an informational hearing with the TRPA Governing Board's Regional Plan Implementation Committee. And that's where we're really looking for final direction from the committee to kind of move these amendments forward to consideration by the Governing Board. And I'm really encourage everybody to attend both those meetings or look for the staff report and provide your input to the Governing Board. I'm sure they would really appreciate hearing from everybody on that. And we also have a webpage that explains the amendments, and I'll put that in the chat as well. And if anybody wants, if you are not on our Housing e-news already, you can send me your email and I can make sure that you get information in your inbox about these opportunities as they're coming up. And there'll be a few more in the fall as the amendments move forward for consideration for approval. So thank you. And also just wanted to thank Stacy and Christina for all your work with MHC over these past years. This has been a really great experience for everybody. Thank you.
Chase.
Thanks, Christina. I'm Chase with Placemate. Couple of quick updates is in July, Placer County Board of Supervisors did approve extending the Lease to Locals program for second year. So we're officially out of the pilot program in Placer County. And updated numbers between the Placer County program and Truckee combined, the Lease to Locals program has unlocked just about 200 homes and helped find housing for more than 400 of our local workforce. So pleased with those results. In somewhat related in the Tahoe region in general, is Washoe County has actually allocated funding for the Lease to Locals program in the basin. It sounds like because of their rules for funding requirements, we might have to go to an RFP, but we're looking to roll out the Lease to Locals program in the Incline Crystal Bay area. So that'll connect the dots going all the way from Washoe County around the West Shore up the South Shore. So everything in Tahoe except Douglas County at this point. And then one more update is we just signed our first East Coast market in Nantucket. So the Lease to Locals program is continuing to expand both in the Tahoe region and other markets as well. And that's it.
Thanks. So thank you guys. We wanted to keep this to an hour and a half. It's not like our normal meeting, so I appreciate everyone giving really fast updates. Go ahead, Emily.
Thank you. Just wanted to say we are grateful for our coordination with NTCA and look forward to those recommendations for DOT funding going to our October 17th board meeting, which is in Tahoe. We've been working very closely with Karen on TRPA updates. We also have at that same October 17th board meeting, we will be bringing forward our Tahoe Basin Area Plan code amendments, which we hope will significantly facilitate workforce housing in the basin. And then one last note, Heidi and I just got back from the inaugural Moving Mountains Housing Access Summit in Big Sky. And that was really informative for both of us to be around mountain towns, developers, manufacturers, and investors working specifically on workforce housing in the mountain towns. And I was able to present on our efforts on a panel with the state senator from Colorado, the mayor of Vail, and the housing manager from Park City. So great.
And then I'll add, as the party was walking out, he handed me 4 updates. Hobart Mills, the lease with the Forest Service is going forward. We're convening a homeless work group, and that is in collaboration, I think, with a lot of our community collaborative partners. Pacific Crest Commons receives town tax credits, or they've been approved. And then they have allocated $600,000 for the support of the JPA initiatives.
That's fantastic. What a great note to end on. So just to remind you, here on our website is our partner highlight page. You can go to the bottom of this page and submit your highlights if we didn't get to you today. And if we did get to you, we can also still do that, and we'll make sure to show
Those are going to be important as we roll out our storytelling. We're going to pay attention to who's giving us information, not in this format, but in a format that we can then promote with the media and what is happening with our partners and what's happening.
Great, and with that, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Yeah,
Landed that plane on time.
thank you everyone for doing this. Thank you.
1 out of 5.
Yeah.
It's good.